Good morning, sir, and everyone in the class. Today, my group will give a presentation about the chapter 1, You and Your College Life. First, I would like to welcome my group mates. First is Kowen Jane, Ho Wei Chin, and Lao Cha Sin. And I am the first speaker. My name is Yak Wei Zhe. Let's begin our presentation. First, I would like to do some introduction on this chapter. After you read through this chapter or after you listen to our presentation, you will know how to list the important personal values and relate them to a college education. And you will think about the career that fit in your interests, skills, and personality. Do the things you like will be more effective. And you will also understand the differential between high school and college. There are so many different between high school and college. One of them is your schedule. And you will know the importance of develop positive attitude and why you have to develop positive attitude. And you will also know why you have to accept your responsibility in this presentation. And you will understand the difference and similar with other type of student. There are many type of student, which is some of them will be similar with you and some of them will be different with you. You will understand the characteristic of successful student. There are many characteristics involved in a successful student, not only getting good grade, but about your college life. And we will introduce the 4 steps of learning process. We also introduce the different learning style. After you know your learning style, you will know how to benefit your learning style and how to expand your learning skill in this presentation. You will understand course within your college. There are so many courses you can choose in your college. For example, some of the general elective, the major course, and the core course. You will know your college policies and their importance. You will understand the real definition of success in college. As what I just said just now, it is not only about grade to be success in college, it's about your college life too. You will learn the importance of grade and the importance of first year. You have to be successful in your first year of college age. So the first I'm going to talk about is the value. What is value? The definition of value is things that matter to a person. In other words, things that important to a person. So ask yourself this question. What makes you feel good? What can you do if you have time, money, and opportunities? Do you feel good by having conversation with your lecturer? Do you feel good by meeting new friends? If you have time, money, and opportunities, what you will use it to? You will learn new skill, and what we will do. So students with open-minded and think about their own value and willing to learn will be more successful. Because there are so many things that you can see, you can know, and you can learn in college. So you have to be open-minded and willing to learn more. The next one I'm going to talk about is positive attitude. Positive attitude can lead to motivation. As an example, if you are a negative thinker, you think that everything is come against you. You think your assignment is very hard. You think your examination is very hard. So you will never have the willingness to do it. Although you have do it, you will do it in a terrible way. So you have to be a positive thinker. Think about what can you benefit in the examination. What can you learn in the assignment? It will benefit your future career. So think about this. You will be more motivated to do it. So as what I always tell myself, positive thinking is the key to success. Everything has the best side and also the good side. Always think about the good side. It will motivate you and give you more willingness to do it. Next one is self-management. What is self-management? Self-management is manage your own work by yourself. So the first thing about self-management is accept your responsibility. Why you have to accept your responsibility? Because there are a lot of things you can learn from your responsibility and it is a preparation for your working age. What is related to your responsibility? It's not only about your grade And it is also about the friendship, the hygiene of your hostel, and so on. The second one is making decisions by your own. As a college student, no one will make decisions for you. Your parents will not make decisions for you. Your friend will not make decisions for you. So you have to be independent and think about what is the best decision for yourself. The third one is making yourself be able to change. Why you have to make yourself be able to change? Because college age is a grace period for you to ready yourself to working age. So you have to prepare yourself and always let yourself be able to change yourself from a student to a worker. The fourth one is personal ethical code. Set yourself a goal and plan how you meet your goal. And the fifth one is enjoy your college life. Now I will pass the presentation to Ko Wen-jin.
I'm a second presenter. My name is Ko Wen-jin. Now I'm going to talk about the profile of a success student. Before I go deep into it, just wonder what you guys think about a successful student. Is it the one who achieved CGPA 4.0 or the one who have normal result but it is active in all kinds of activities? The first one, to profile of a success student, the first one is having a good attitude and know how to stay motivated. For example, they will find a way to solve the problem and difficulties instead of keep on complaining. Therefore, they will stay motivated every day. The next one is develop good time management. For example, the student will plan their time to study and start their assignment and projects earlier. They will not burn the midnight oil. Therefore, the time management is important. Besides, develop critical thinking skill is also important for a success student. Students have to think out of the box instead of 100% following the textbook. Having effective strategy in taking notes is also important because in our college life, there is too much things to learn and we can't 100% remember it. So we have to take notes so that we can have a revision before the test or exam. Next, knowing how to prepare for tests. Before your test, you have to know what you need to study and and we need to study smart, don't just memorize. Next, having good communication and social skill. For example, the student have to have an interaction with the lecturer and class student in or outside the class. Next, learn to write well in classes. In college, we need to write well in order for us to do our assignment, to score higher marks. But in future, we need to write well because we need to write a lot of emails and resume and letters. To be a successful student, we will need to know how to gain the most from readings. For example, you read a book, you have to capture the main points that they want to say and learn the value in it. Next, develop a social relationships. It's also important. They develop social relationships that contribute to rather than distract from their educational experience. Next is having a health awareness. Students have to have a they take control of their health with good habits that help them to be less stressed and to be healthier. ability to manage their finance is also important for a successful student, because they need to spend their money wisely and not simply spend the money to buy the unnecessary things. Being able to transit well from the world of college into their future career is also important. Next one, the learning cycle. There are 4 steps of learning steps in the learning cycle. The first one is prepare, second is absorb, third one is capturing, the fourth one is reviewing. Prepare. Prepare is means to ready and equip beforehand for a specific purpose, as for an event or occasions. Student who prepared and a student who has not prepared will make a big difference. For example, if the student the students not prepared, they can't follow the lecturer's pace. Therefore, prepare to learn is the first step for learning. Absorb. Absorbing refers to actual taking in new ideas, information, or experience. It requires certain understanding in order for us to learn new things. For instance, understanding the topic instead of keep on repeating or memorizing the facts or informations. Capturing. Capturing is referring to take note. No matter how good is your memory, take good notes in college is still important, because as I mentioned just now, in college life there is too much things for us to study, so that's why we need to take notes for us to revision before the exam. Effective note-taking skills determines one's ability of learning. The more ability of taking, the more effective note-taking skills of one student, the ability of learning will also higher. Lastly, reviewing. Reviewing means to look over, study or examine the things you have studied. It also to solidify your learning and reach learning goal. It is also to store information in long-term memory. Therefore, it is a step to know what we understand. Now I'm going to pass to the third speaker, Ho Wei Jin.
Thank you, Weiser and Wen. And the third speaker, Ho Wei Jin. And actually, to get a excellent result, it is not easy, because you need to complete the first step, which is the first step is preparation, absorb, capturing, and reviewing. I have interviewed one of my friends from the accounting course, and she's getting a very good result. And I had asked her some questions. She has told me that she spent a lot of her time in the library to study a lot of outside material in the textbook in order to get some extra information, because the lecture in the class is not enough for students. And I'm going to introduce the core courses, electives, majors, and credits. Credits is the minimum requirement that need to achieve before we graduate. For example, in our universities, we need to achieve at least 120, if not mistaken, before we graduate. For the core course, it means mandatory courses, or we call as the general education requirements, which require everyone to complete in the universities. For the core, for example, in our university is writing for academic purpose, community service, or constitutions. For the major, is courses which require students in their field to complete. Major do divide into 2 parts, which is major. The fourth is elective. Elective is a course which can choose freely. Electives is divided into 2 parts, which is a general elective and a major elective. General elective is you can choose outside of your course, such as you want to choose the course from the journalism, or you want to choose a course from the Chinese study. For the major elective is a course you choose within your major. Like I'm the finance student, I need to choose some course related to my courses, to my field. And the online courses, in the new era, 21st century, some universities did introduce these courses. Online courses is a new learning experience via computer rather than classrooms, and it creates an independent learning style because you have no instructor or lecturer to guide you all the way. You need to learn by yourself. Mostly, these online courses mostly for those who are currently working and hope to complete their study. For example, after I complete my degree studies, I need to further study in my master, but I still need to earn some money, and I can work as part-time and I can study for the online courses as well. For our university, Xiamen University didn't provide these courses, but for my information, some Western country did provide these courses. There are some tips for the online courses. If you have access to the online courses, you need to always go to access on the Moodle, because you have no instructor. For the online courses, the university did require you to access at least how many times if you want to take for the exam to get the cert. And of course, you need to have a high speed of internet connection, because when you are having the FaceTime with your lecturer, you need to have a high speed internet. And of course, you need to have a self-motivating, because you are learning without the guidance of any instructor or lecturer. And you also able to pay full attention without the instructor. Responsible to complete all assignments without the reminder. You need to do all the research by yourself without the guidance. And it is an independent learning style. For the class attendance is required at some university. For our university, some courses did require students to achieve at least 80% of the attendance to get 10% of the marks. Some attendance is counted as grade also, and skip class will inevitably affect the grade. For the college policies, the most important is do not plagiarize and do your own work, because it will affect your mark. And if you are found that you plagiarize the other's work, you will be punished by the school. And some school did not allow the student to drink the alcohol and be careful of the drug users and sexual harassment, hazing, and other crimes. College resources. For our university, we do have the academic advising office. If the student want to take the leave or has some academic issue, you can go to this office to ask the officer. And student affairs office, if the student want to look more information, you can go to this office as well. For the finance department, the department who help the student to settle all the fees. The library, accomplish all the knowledge there. And the student health clinic, student career and job office to help students to find their intern jobs, and computer lab, counseling center. If student has some problem, can go to the office to search for help. Tutorial centers, and then logistic office. Next, I'll pass to Jiaxin.
Okay, so now I'm Shashim. I'm going to talk about success and failure. What is success? Success is when you achieve what you want in your life, when you are happy, challenged, living life to its fullest, and contributing to the world. As you reach this point, you won't think your grade in your college is the priority in your life. So as a result, if you didn't achieve a high GPA in your college, it doesn't mean that you are a failure. So the next, I will talk about how much do grades matter. Is it the one who get a low GPA then it means that he or she is a failure. No, right? So, here are the ways grades do matter. Firstly, grades plays important role in several ways. Firstly is grades maintain a good rate, help you to continue studying the course as well as to graduate. For example, in Siemens, the GPA for entering business subject like accounting, international business, and accounting and finance are 2.0. Next, students should maintain a good GPA in order to apply for scholarship or to continue receiving financial awards. Besides that, grade is important in certain courses, as in some programs they require a constant GPA to count toward the program or major. Furthermore, grade is important in employment, but grade is just one of the requirements in the first step. For example, grade help you to pass in the first session of the interview, but the following interview is based on your personal soft skill. For example, like your communication way, how you cope with a group of people, as all of these things you almost can't learn from the books. You need to learn from the practical or from your past experience. So, the last of the importance of grade is for your further studies. For example, you plan to continue your study to professional school, graduate school, or other educational programs. So after listening to our presentation today, let me summarize the main points for all of you. So first of the main point is values. Students should have their own values and motivation to achieve their goals in the college. Next, students should be positive and be able to manage themselves well in order to success in the future. For example, you should plan a timetable to study, to exercise, as a healthy lifestyle is very important in your college life, and so on. The next is find your own learning styles as well as study skills. Different students have their own study styles, and also you should know your potential and your weakness and try to improve it. Moreover, appreciate college resources and also obey college rules and regulations, such as the class attendance and promenades, college policies, and also I repeated the points. So, students should obey college rules as it is stated in the college rules. So, students should be disciplined. And the last is the method of grades. So, grade is important in your GPA, exam slip, but it doesn't mean that if you achieve a low grades or you are unsatisfied with your grades, means that you are a failure, you can't do this, or you can't further your studies, and so on. It is just a measurement. It's not really play a very important role in your future and the priority in your life. So that's all for our presentation. I hope all of you have learned something and getting started on the right foot now. Think about what is your goals and plan and take action now. So that's all. Hope you guys benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question? Actually, practice makes perfect. If you want to get something, you need to sacrifice something as well. That's why if you want to get a 4.0, you need to sacrifice a lot of times on the reading. And if you need to learn leadership or management skill, you need to participate in some activities, and of course you will need to sacrifice your study as well. So try your best to find the balance points between the studies and the activities.
Thank you.
Okay, before I get to my part of the lecture, I want to make a few comments about the Team 1's presentation and also just some general things. First off, Team 1, typically the first team is usually made up of really good presenters because they're not afraid to be Team 1. And Team 1 did a very good job. They will all get an A in this. So they just one group a day for now. Later on, I will go ahead and set a schedule for you later, but for the time being, it's one per day. And then after after I get done with Covey, then we might end up having to do 2 a day to finish up. But otherwise, I would never get to say anything. So for now, we'll just be doing 1 a day. In fact, it might even be, listen up people, it might even be that we'll get so crowded on this because we have so many teams that some teams will do it by video and won't do it in class. We'll see how things go as we get close to the end of the semester. But we have enough students here to, it's going to take a lot of class time. And so I may actually schedule a time with you and have your group present it on the video to nobody and put it on the website for people to do as homework. Okay, a couple of things I do want to say. Some of you are getting here way late. Like I noticed some of the last people were getting here like 25 after the hour. That's too late. I'm thinking about putting the sign-up sheet on a table back there and having you sign up as you come in, and then around 10:10, go grabbing that sheet. So expect to see a sign-up sheet on the back table, and when you come in the back door and sign the sheet, and at 10:10, I'm going to grab that sheet. So anybody comes in after 10:10, you're disturbing the class. You're not going to be counted as being, you should come to listen to the lesson as much as you can. I'd also encourage people that come initially to move forward. So the people who come in late don't have to come up towards the front of the class because that's more disturbing than otherwise. But need you to come on time. We only have this one class a week, and we need to take full advantage of it. Okay. As far as the the presentations go, another thing that teams should do is they should give me a printout before they start so I can take notes on it. So that's also mentioned in the critique sheet. So again, I'm forgiving Team 1 because they're the first team, and I expect people to make some mistakes when they're the first team. But it is your team responsibility to give me a printout and also to send me the electronic version so I can put it on the internet almost immediately. Also, I mentioned that on your PowerPoint and in your presentation, you should have approximately 2 questions per person have been created, two multiple choice questions per person. Build them into your PowerPoint and go and review them at the end of your PowerPoint for everybody. And those questions will be used in my quizzes if they're good questions. So if they're not good questions, I might revise them or I might not use them. But if they are good questions, odds are they will end up on the quiz. And so you'll need to be attentive to that. The timing was good. This team went through fairly quickly. And so the timing, I think, was fine. Do make sure, let me ask this question to just make sure, are the names on your page 1 in the order that you presented? They are? Okay. Be sure to do that, by the way, again, so I don't get mixed up. Put your names on page 1 and put them in the order that you're presenting so I know so I can make sure I give the grades right. Because I am grading you individually, and so I need to make sure I know for sure. Sometimes it's hard for me to hear your names when you pronounce them, and so just the same as it's hard for you to understand my English. Sometimes it's hard for me sometimes to understand your English. So be sure that the names of your team, the team members, are on the front cover of your PowerPoint and in the order in which you're presenting. Okay, as far as some other things go, be sure one of your responsibilities is to make sure that you cover the best, most important, most relevant topics. And so on the one hand, I think maybe, for example, mostly the team did well with that. One question I might have is, for example, is online learning relevant? We don't have online classes here at Scheinman, except for the class work that I provide, in which case you might discuss that aspect of it. But it's not really an online course. It could be, because we're putting everything on the course, on the Moodle site. But it's not an online course. It's an online supplemented course, I guess you could say. So that's just one example of, make sure you choose right. And if you can, they did a good job. On the other hand, they did a good job of localizing, you might say, the information about the services available at Scheinman. And so that's good. So just make good judgment. Part of my grading, it's a little bit maybe to your disadvantage. Well, it won't really matter. I'm getting to hear this chapter twice. Once from this class and once from my class yesterday. So as I was listening, I know some things that they didn't include that I think maybe they should have included. But I also now made notes on the team that presented yesterday. There's some things that they did not include that they should have included. So you're kind of being compared to another team in another class as you present. So I'm not totally going into this blind. One of the things that was not covered in this presentation that was covered yesterday is more detail on the learning style. Let me address that in just a second. There's the basic learning styles are basically dependent on your senses. Some people are audio oriented, so they're auditory learners. Some are visual oriented, they're visual learners. Some are kinesthetic learners. That means kinesthetic is body movement. There are other types of learning as well, but those are important to understand. About 25 years ago, when I was a young man, was my first introduction to computer-based education. At the time, my youngest daughter was like in the 3rd grade, and she was struggling a little bit. And I was kind of, I became familiar with a program created by a company in America called Jostens. And Jostens had spent $80 million in the 1980s, which was real money in those days, hiring the best educators they could find and creating an online curriculum that I still don't think anybody has beaten it since then. They themselves improved the graphics in the mid-1990s. In the 1980s, graphics weren't very good. And so the version that I was using in the early 1990s was replaced in the late 1990s with better graphics and better audio as far as that goes. just because the technology had changed. But the content they had was superb because what they did was they included all three of those learning styles. Everything they taught, every concept they taught visually, with audio, and with requiring the person to interact with the program. They had a lot of games and stuff built into it already. We might have heard a lot about gamification of education. Maybe you guys haven't, but that is now a major issue, a positive issue in education is how to gamify education to make it more interesting to students. And basically, they were already using gamification in the 1980s with this group. As I said, the actual curriculum they developed, I think, is unparalleled by anything created since then. The graphics are, like I said, they had to improve their own graphics. My daughter was seen as a mediocre student until I put her on this program after school, and she enjoyed it. And it allowed, the other thing it did was it did a very good job of going at the student's pace. They would do a pre-test, and if they pre-tested poorly, they would be given some remedial support for their pre-test. And if they knew everything already, it would push them forward and not have them waste their time if they already knew what was being presented. And so it was very individualized at their own pace, multi-sensitive, multi-sensed, whatever curriculum. So how does that relate to you? Besides the fact that I think online education is the future, it is important for you to understand, as they said, but they didn't go into detail today, to understand how you learn best. For example, when I was about your age, I went into an intensive Spanish language program. In 2 months, we went into basically we lived in a dormitory, and we did our training in that same dormitory. Once we walked in, we could no longer speak English, except one day a week during recreation time we could speak English. Other than that, we were not allowed to speak English. That was so effective that within 2 weeks I was dreaming in Spanish, because my mind had already accepted I was no longer allowed to speak in Spanish. My mind, even in his dreams, went to Spanish. It was making up some words sometimes, but they sounded Spanish. So it even tricked my mind for when I was sleeping. My mind was trying to speak in Spanish. So in 2 months, after 2 months, I went to El Salvador in Central America and immediately started teaching in just two months of Spanish training. Now, Spanish to English is an easier language than if I were to learn Mandarin or something. But nonetheless, it's still a demonstration of how fast you can learn something when you really immerse yourself. And it was very multimedia, multimodal, where we were hearing, where we were seeing, where we were doing all the time, all day long. We were being taught lessons, and we were having to teach lessons, and using the language all day long. Contrast that to when I moved to Kazakhstan about 10 years ago. I was teaching at a university like this where the teaching was in English. The university gave us no incentive to learn the local language. So the local language in Kazakhstan is actually two local languages, Russian and Kazakh, which is a Turkish language. My wife, for example, is from Kazakhstan. Her family speaks Kazakh in the home primarily, but she was under the Soviet Union. They sent all the students to a boarding school, and so once she went to the boarding school, it was all in Russian. So she's pretty much bilingual, natively bilingual. Well, I got there, and I had no real incentive to learn Russian or Kazakh. But I did buy a program. You may be familiar with the Pimsleur program. It's all audio, almost all audio. I found out I'm not an audio learner. I listened to the audio lessons for 9 years, and my Russian is terrible. I realize now that I'm a visual and kinesthetic learner. So I realize that, and if I really want to learn Russian, for example, the way for me to do I have to be reading along with hearing, and I have to be writing. Writing is kinesthetic. And so if you're learning a new language and you're writing in that language, that's a kinesthetic activity. When I was at my master's degree, well, in all my schooling, as I went through my college curriculum, I learned that I would learn better if I wrote down all my notes and rewrote them very clearly before a test. And unlike what was said up here, I would stay up all night if necessary to get the grade I wanted and study those 3x5 cards or 4x6 cards and inches. And so having written them out and written out everything I thought the teacher would possibly ask, I would then study those as late into the night as I needed to make sure I got the grade I wanted. Now, there's a couple of things about that. One of the things I tell my children is that the most important thing you do to get a good grade in a class is listen to the professor. By the way, that means don't come in late also. Because the professor, if you listen to the professor, he almost always will tell you exactly how to get an A. If you pay attention to him, he will tell you how to get an A. And he will and that includes what he will probably include on the test. Not always, but if he has time, this class sometimes a little bit short, in order for me to tell you what's really important to me. And the fact that teams are presenting, I can't review everything they said to tell you what's important to me from what they are presenting. But in a typical class where you're having to do a lot of reading and where the professor is teaching, the teacher is basically telling you when he does his lecture what he thinks is important in that book. And so you don't have to read near as much if you are paying attention to what the professor is telling you is important in that book. Then that becomes the most important thing that you prepare for, because he's giving you all sorts of clues. He's read the book too. And when he read the book, what he taught you in the lecture was what he thought was important. So that lecture becomes extremely important. The other thing is the importance of multi-sensory education. And even if you find, like I did, that I'm more of a visual and kinesthetic learner, all of them are important. I'd say the genius of this program that I put my daughter on was that it was totally multisensory. What happened after 2 months is that they gave her a national test along with all the other students, and the teacher literally had to apologize to us because she said, "I didn't know your daughter was the smartest kid in class," after 2 months of this curriculum. What really happened was that it plugged holes that she had in her education. And a lot of us get through education, we don't pay enough attention or whatever, and so there are holes in our education, especially when it comes to something like math or English, or language a little bit less so, but math particularly, something like that. If you miss a part of math, that will haunt you forever. You can't afford to, if math is going to be any part of your future, you have to plug those holes. And that's basically what this program did, is that whatever holes she had in her education in math and English particularly, it plugged them. And so suddenly she went from being a more mediocre student to being one of the top students in 2 months by just plugging those holes. And in a multi-sensory way that helped her retain it. So it is important that you know how you learn and that you adapt. And like I say, my adaptation, because I'm also, like I say, I know the kinesthetic aspect is really important to me. I write down on these cards, note cards, everything I think a professor will have on a test. And that very action of writing it down embeds it into my brain. That is a good way of learning a new language too, is do it by hand. Write it down. Write down the words that you want to memorize, and that will embed into your brain. Again, which is what I did not do with Russian. Say something else with that. Well, just an example of how I do take my studies very seriously, and I do agree with the team and with the book that straight A's are not important. I did get straight A's in all my graduate work because I took them extremely seriously. And I guess maybe I'm a proud person, and so I want to be among the best anyway. I was a little bit shy, a little lower than that. I was 3.83 in my bachelor's program out of 4.0. And at that time, in all the times that I've studied, I've had to work part-time and have been involved in other activities. And so it was more challenging as a graduate student. I got a perfect 4.0, but by then I was married. I was working more than I was when I was younger. But I always worked part-time to supplement financially my education from my second year on. My first year I didn't have to, but from the second year on I did. And I think that also helped prepare me for employment after graduation in every case, because I had something to put on my CV that was not just what happened at college. I had work experience that I could put on it. So things that you do out of class are as important, probably, as the things in class. I would say that if an employer, like myself, sees that you have more than a 3.0, then they're satisfied that you know the content. 3.0 out of 4.0. If you're under 3.0, they might be wondering. So I would say a good goal is to be over 3.0. A 4.0 is not necessarily going to impress them a lot more than a 3.0 if you have other stuff in your CV. Work experience, internship experience, club experience, all these other things. And as was said, the 3.0 maybe, and your CV overall will get you the interview. Your interview will seal the deal. Your interview will be the most important thing. Once, your CV will get you the interview. After that, it's your interview that will depend whether they hire you or somebody else. So the CV is important, but it's not just grades. It's just not what class you took and how good grades they were. That's not all they're looking for. They are going to look for other stuff. Did you actually get some practical experience along the way? Did you serve internships that related to the job that you're doing, etc. It's also important. Networking is important, and that's also part of being more than just a nerd. Who you know is very important. I think here in Asia is actually considered more important than in America, but it's increasingly seen as important in America as well. If in America, one of the benefits of going to someplace like Harvard is the network you build, not so much that it's a better education than someplace else. It may not be. Some of the teachers at Harvard might be really good researchers and not very good teachers. So going to Harvard does not necessarily mean that you're going to have a better education, but it does mean you'll have a better network. And so networks that you build are important, but you can build networks in other ways. For example, how many of you went to see the Sri Tan lecture on Wednesday? Anybody here go to that? I sent you information on that. You missed out on a great opportunity. Everybody who asked a question got a copy of one of his books. He had a lot of very important stuff to teach. He's one of Malaysia's richest entrepreneurs, but he gives a lot of his money away. I'm going to invite him back to be part of a conference I'm trying to develop here at the university. He was very, very friendly and very willing to come back, and gave me his card so I could email him and discuss the details on it. You don't know how something like that might work out for you. My first job, by the way, networking includes your professors. Very important, your professors. If you're going to be shy in class, that's not real helpful to you. My first job was because somebody contacted my professor and asked him if he had a student that he could recommend to be editor, to come right out of college and become the editor of a newspaper. I was the one he recommended. And so he saw that I had practical skills by then. I was some of my jobs were involved in student publications. I was the editor of the yearbook, and I was acted as an editor of the student magazine and an editor at times at the student newspaper. So he knew I had practical skills, that I wasn't just a nerd. And so when his friend came calling and said, I need an editor, who will you recommend? He gave him my name. That probably changed my entire life. In fact, it did for sure, because I was going to stay in school another semester and probably go into teaching right then. Now, I don't know. I think for my future, it was more important that at that time I go into the profession. Because if I got into teaching, it would have been high school teaching, not college teaching, because that was with my bachelor's degree. That would have led me in a totally different direction in my life, and I think I went in the right direction. I think that did change my life for the better, becoming an editor at the age of 21 of a city newspaper rather than a teacher of a high school. So networking is important, and one of your most important networks is your professor. If you do real well and you make friends with me, for example, I have a young lady who just emailed me and said, can you please recommend me for a master's degree in America? She has now applied for like 10 different universities. It's going to take me a lot of time, but because of my relationship to her, I will do that. It may take me 4 or 5 hours to respond to all of those recommendation requests, depending on how different they are. But I will do that for her because she was a good student, a good attentive student. She didn't have the best grade, and she doesn't have the most skills, but she always did her work and always paid attention. She sat right on the front row all the time. She always had questions, and we developed a good teacher-student relationship. She was an adequate student, not the best student. But I'll definitely take my time in responding and giving her a high recommendation for these master's programs in America because she asked me to. And we have that kind of relationship now. So networking is very important. Okay. I want to go now to the other textbook. I'm going to go ahead and bring mine up. In this... in my version of PowerPoint, that's what you see. You should have probably already seen the how it looks on the on Moodle. So it looks a little different from my computer, which is being recorded, as opposed to what you're seeing up there. I'm going to. We are now. I should have moved that circle. I didn't, but we're now in. Habit 3, put first things first. This is, according to Dr. Covey, and one of the videos that I will give you as homework if we don't have time to see it today, this is the most important of all the habits. All the habits come together with habit 3. He says it's the one when he does follow-up with his former students, with people who have paid him a lot of money to work with him. He finds that this is the one where if they're failing, this is the one they're failing at. So pay very close attention to this. We don't have a lot of time now that I'm having less time to present. So I'm going to present the most important stuff of this habit. And in fact, it won't take a lot of time. If you pay attention, this can change your life. This is the one that changed Dr. Covey's life. This habit changed Dr. Covey's life for sure. And I'll explain what I mean by that as we proceed. So, putting first things first, a philosopher once said, things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. The problem with our lives is that we're always busy. One of the questions asked yesterday, or rather Wednesday, to the Shritan who was here talking, was one of the students asked, how do I fit everything in? In fact, that person had already studied 7 Habits. That's why I thought maybe he was from one of my classes, but apparently not. I didn't recognize him, but I thought, well, maybe maybe I just didn't recognize him. But he had read 7 Habits on his own, and he said, how do I fit everything in? The Shritan gave him some... the Shritan only sleeps 4 hours a day. He thinks you can get away with it. I have done that at times when I have had to do that. There's actually your sleeping cycles, the scientists say, go into like 1.5 hour periods. And so the best time for you to wake up is at the end of a 1.5 hour period. So that'd mean 4.5 hours, 6 hours, 7.5 hours. Somewhere at a 1.5 hour, if you will be most alert if it's at the end of a 1.5 hour period of your sleep. So if you're going to sleep for 4 hours, you should actually sleep for 4.5 hours, and you'll be able to wake up and be pretty alert at 4.5 hours. I go for 6. Some doctors say that at my age I should be going 10. There's no way I'm going to go 10. No way. They say that your age you should be going 10. I know most of you don't. But I would recommend, I think that the typical person, I think 6 is well, we saw a video by Schwarzenegger. He said if you're sleeping more than 6, you're being lazy, basically. So I don't know. Everybody's going to have to figure it out on their own, but do pay attention to the cycles. And it does actually work. I've noticed this myself. If I go a little bit over 6 hours, if I go 6 3/4, that's not at a 1.5 hour. I'll be sleepier than if I wake up at 6 in 6 hours. If I go 6.5, I'll be sleepier than if I wake up at 6 hours. So those 1.5 hour cycles are important to understand. One of the students asked, well, what do you do if you're, he said he basically skims 8 to 10 books a month is one of his things that Sri Tan does. And so one of the students said, well, how do you stay awake? You've only slept 4 hours and you're trying to read late at night. How do you stay awake? He said, well, what I do is I just stand up. I do my reading standing up. I can't go to sleep if I'm standing up. So he's kind of a unique person. And I'm not saying you're all going to be a billionaire in 10 years of work. He was a fighter pilot. He did his studies in America for 15 years and worked in America for 15 years. Was in the American military, not the military here, but the American military. Then came back. He was a civil engineer. He, learned a lot just working for another company for a while as a civil engineer. Then in just a 10-year period, he became a billionaire as he grew older. So he didn't start his own business basically until he was about 40 years old. And then by the time he was 49, he retired. I'm sure he has ongoing businesses, but he himself retired from his business that is probably still making money for him because he does understand the importance of teaching people under you and helping them to grow and take over the company, basically. So he has people under him probably running his company, and he's still making money without having to work anymore. Just oversee the management that he's created, that he's taught, that he's prepared to take over for himself. Important ideas. Okay, but anyway, he's very much a person. He went into a lot of detail as to how he schedules his time. Very detailed. He's doing he had 10 goals a day he's working on. And so he divides his day very specifically. I'm going to work on this and this and this and this. And he scheduled his time very precisely, which relates to what we're talking about. Now, when we talked about leadership, they warned us that efficient management without effective leadership is, as one individual phrased it, like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. No management success can compensate for failure in leadership. But leadership is hard because we're often caught in management paradigm. On the other hand, you can't manage until you know what you're managing for. So you have to have that end in mind before you can become a good manager, especially a manager of yourself. Now, there's a little bit difference. Like in the last class, we talked about that Seattle CEO of an oil company who in his company, he had to stop being a manager. He had to, as a CEO, he had to be the leader. He had to be the one creating the vision. He had to be the one making the big decisions, the broad view. He could no longer afford to be the manager, the day-to-day manager, and manage his company properly. Now, in the organization, then he stopped, in that sense, being a manager of the company, but in his own life, he still had to be a manager of his own life. Now, he doubled the revenue of his company in 1 year by delegating to other people the management of the company and him taking the leadership role, true leadership role of the company. So don't get confused between our personal management and our management of a business, for example. His management of the business was that his role had to be as the leader, so he gave away the day-to-day management. one of the important things when it comes to being a good manager of yourself is learning how to delegate. And that's what he was doing, is that he delegated to people he felt were responsible, and he made them do their job. He said they fought that at first. They wanted him to do their job, basically. He wanted him to make the decisions. He said, no, you guys make the decisions. I'm the leader. You're the managers. Managers manage. And so he made them do their job. That's basically what the Sritan said in his presentation on Wednesday, is that he trains and he prepares the managers and he lets them do their job. He does tell them when they're doing wrong, but he has a good relationship with them. He's still the boss. He believes there has to be a distinction between the boss and the rest. He can be friendly to them, but he can't be their friend, in a sense. He can be friendly, but not their friend, because then they'll take advantage of him. And so there's a very fine line there, what he can do in being the boss. The second creation then is habit 3. The first creation was begin with the end in mind. You're creating something, as he said, spiritually. You're creating it intellectually, spiritually, whatever you want to call it. You're creating the thing in habit 2. You're creating something before it happens, including yourself. You're creating yourself before it happens. You're creating your business before it happens. You're creating your family before it happens. You're creating something before it happens. Now, in the second creation, habit 3, you're now creating it for real. That's why it's harder. It's one thing to spend some time dreaming about your first creation, dreaming dreaming what you want to become, dreaming what you want your family to be like, dreaming what you want your business to be like. One thing about dreaming about it, now you have to actually do it. And so you start with, in habit 2, you're creating your mission statement. You're creating your long-term goals. But now in habit 3, you have to create your short-term goals and your actual schedule of what you're going to do every day and manage your time very well. The Sritan talked about this too. He said, basically, we're all equal in one thing, and one thing only. We all have 24 hours a day. That's the only thing we have, is we have 24 hours a day. And there's nothing anybody can do about that. So that's one way in which everybody's equal. Now, in deciding how to schedule your day, one of the questions that Dr. Covey asked is, think of one thing that you could do that you're not doing now, one thing that you could do that would change your life in your current or future career. And for you would be your future career. What one thing could you do that would make all the difference in the world in your future career? And the second question is, what one thing could you do to make a dramatic change or a dramatic improvement in your own personal life? What would that be? And so it's probably a more relevant question for a little bit older audience. He probably has in mind mostly the people you see in his videos, which are middle-aged people, by and large. People who already have jobs, who already have more freedom to decide what they want to do with their time. But nonetheless, it's relevant to you too. But it will be more relevant once you graduate. Right now, one of the things you're doing to determine your future is what exactly you're doing right now. You're learning. And that is a self-development process. And so it's kind of hard to think of it the same now as your students as you will when you graduate. And now you decide everything. You decide what you want to do for work. You decide what you're going to do in your free time. You decide everything. Now Covey's habits become much, much, much more important to you once you graduate. But this question is one to help you think about what is really important in your life. I think I will, this is just a 6-minute video, so I think I will show this one. So just a second. This CEO, or this actually wasn't CEO, is number 2, and the number 2 man though, this big international company decided that he might very well turn down a promotion to be number one because he had, even though he had been achieving his professional goals, he hadn't been achieving his family goals. And so he had built a new house in a place where, and made it, kind of built it with the family in mind in such a way that they could have lots of family activities and have their friends over and all this sort of stuff. And he decided he was going to stay there no matter what for his family's sake. They had participated in this so much, and they were doing things now as a family they'd never done before. He said, if I can stay here, I'll stay. I will be number one if they want me to be, but I'm not moving to Los Angeles or someplace. My family's now going to be number one. So it's a matter of him deciding what was important to him, and that he had achieved so much, but he had not achieved everything he wanted, and his most important to him was his family. So he was willing to give up a promotion to be the executive of an international corporation in order to do that, in order to maintain this newfound family-centeredness that he was achieving. I think I'm going to go ahead and, while I have it open, go ahead and, before I go back to the PowerPoint, go back and pick up another video. These will be on Moodle, but let me try this other one here. This is more the point of this entire lesson, and I think is good for him to talk about it himself.
The key words to understand are importance and urgency. Importance and urgency. Importance basically comes from within you. Importance is your value system, hopefully based upon principles. Importance is your mission, your central strategy to accomplish those high priority goals and plans to implement that strategy. Urgent comes from the environment.
Okay, so he's comparing, this is an important part of his presentation, is that there's some things that are considered urgent, some things considered important. He says important is really a determination that you make, whereas urgent is what somebody else is telling you. Like, the university always give me paperwork to do. It's not important to me. It may be important to somebody else. It's not important to me. I don't consider it important for the university. I think they should be more concerned about how I teach, not how I fill out paperwork. So that's what he's trying to explain here. So I'll let him go into more detail.
It presses upon you. It's proximate. It's right in front of you. It's often very popular. It could be deep into a social value system. You have to decide what is truly important. That's why I asked you. Notice the question, what are the most important things to you? And then, what are the single activities that you know without any question, by doing those consistently, superbly well, would accomplish marvelous results? So you've identified what's important. We call this a time management matrix. There are four quadrants. Now, quadrant one, you'll notice, is both urgent and important. It's like that important client that is contacting Elizabeth in her international consulting business. But it's not at a convenient time. But it's a pressing need on the part of that client. Quadrant one. She needs to attend to it. It's important. It's also urgent. Quadrant one is where you tend to move toward crisis, toward problems. If you're not in that meeting, you'll have a problem. So it's a quadrant one. You have to be in that meeting. So it's either a present problem or a problem in the making if you neglect it. Quadrant two is not urgent, but it is important. Prevention, preparation, planning, relationship building, empowerment, sharpening the saw, self-development, setting up mission statements. Quadrant two is the leadership quadrant. Quadrant three is not important, but it is urgent. Those things that are pressing, sometimes even popular, Proximate, right in front of you, but not important. And 4 is neither urgent nor important. That would be symbolized by these small rocks, these green pebbles. All right, now look at your paper. Look at your answers to those 2 questions. What quadrant were those answers in? What would you say? One activity you know would produce marvelous results. Yes, sir. What did you have down? What quadrant? Quadrant 2. Now, why isn't it 1? Because you're not now doing it. It's not urgent. A low urgency need. When we're driven by the urgent, when we are addicted to the urgent, it drives us into what quadrants? 1 and 3. In fact, you examine most executive agendas against 4 quadrants, and you'll find almost all of them are 1 and 3. 2 is usually called other business. What happens then to 2? It gets pushed aside. 2 represents the big rocks. They're pushed aside. Now what happens to 1? It gets larger. How long can you sustain quadrant 1 lifestyle? Doesn't it soon beat you up? Doesn't it burn you out eventually? How many have burned out by quadrant 1? Managing fires, pounding surf, mending fences. Eventually it takes its toll on your body, on your mind. But then the dilemma is faced. Where do you get time for quadrant 2? When you're inundated by quadrant 1 things that are both important and urgent, you neglect quadrants 3 and 4. You literally say no. 4 isn't difficult. One of the reasons people move to 4 is because they are so beat up by 1. So 4 is essentially wasted anyway. Then the key is to take it from 3. Those things that are pressing, sometimes even popular, proximate, right in front of you, but not important. Say no to them. Dare to talk. Things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. You can do this kind of work, this quadrant 2 work, when there is a burning yes inside you about the mission and the purpose and the value system. You can say no to all kinds of unimportant, however urgent other things may be. People will begin to see you differently. They won't just come and throw quadrant 3 things to you all the time, like I did one time to one of the managers who reported to me. Yeah, it's really urgent. It was obviously quadrant 3 from his point of view. He said, sure, I'll work on it if you want. Pulled down his project board. I saw all the projects, deadline dates, how far he'd gone. I realized I'm dealing with someone who has purpose and organization here. I'm not going to mess up this person's life and get involved in reordering this system. So I said, well, I'll find somebody else. And I threw it to another crisis manager. Now, what if it's your boss that gives you a quadrant 3 project? By definition, what does that make it? 1. What is important to another person must be as important to you as the other person is to you. That's why most of you put down on your first things first list your relationships with your loved ones, your family. I know you did. I'll bet there's not an exception in this entire room. There's also not an exception in this room that the things you wrote down under the last 2 questions are all quadrant 2. Preparation, prevention, values clarification, planning, relationship building, true recreation, or empowerment. And notice all of those have to do with relationships, either with self or preparing toward future relationships or the rebuilding of relationships. All 7 habits are in quadrant 2. All 7 of them. Habit 1, to be proactive. You have to be proactive to act on quadrant 2. Why? Quadrants 1 and 3, what? act on you. So you just react to them. You have to be proactive to act on quadrant 2. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Why would that be quadrant 2? It's not urgent to develop a mission statement or a clear sense of what this day, this week, this month, or these goals under each role is, see? Nothing's pressing me to do that. You are proacting the writing of those programs. Habit 3 is where quadrant 2 is taught. Habits 4, 5, and 6 is the process of involving other people in a communication process in moving toward synergistically solving problems. That means come up with solutions that are better. And habit 7, sharpen the saw, is the renewal habit, obviously, is quadrant 2 activity. Seriously, people that start to think in quadrant 2 ways will gradually change their job, their environment. Now they have to be wise and sensitive, but they're proactive. They're doing things to make things happen. They have become a force of nature. That's quadrant 2 thinking.
Thought I had the video off, but I guess I maybe recorded that. Okay, so let me jump ahead here and get to what he was talking about. Okay, so he was talking about this quadrants, the quadrants in this time matrix. This is where the rubber meets the road, as we say in America. This is where things really happen, and why he says all of the other 6 habits all are accomplished through this time matrix. So which quadrant did he say is important, most important? Well, let me put it this way. Which quadrant is most neglected? Which is most neglected? Quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. Somebody? Anybody listen to the video? Which one was ignored, most ignored? That was killing people that make it in class. He surveyed thousands of people and found out if they were failing by not understanding it and living by this system. The quadrant that is being ignored is quadrant 2. So when you answer the question, what one thing that you're not doing now could you do that would change your life? It is by definition in quadrant 2. You've already said it's important. You've already said you've been ignoring it. And so you have not felt it was urgent. Let me tell you about Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey had 8 or 9 kids. I think it's 9. Stephen Covey was very active in his church. Stephen Covey was a very good worker. Stephen Covey obviously put a high priority in education, having his doctorate and so forth. Where in the world did Stephen Covey find time to write the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? If he was also going to be a good father, a good husband, a good community member, good church member, a good worker, where the heck did he find time to write the book? He had to make that time in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 was his writing the book. He had to make it, and to some degree, what he's suggesting here is that if you want it, if you recognize that something's really, really important, you need to push that into quadrant 1. So in your mind, psychologically, you have to say, if I'm going to write a book, I have to put it in quadrant 1. Nobody else is telling me that writing this book is important. I'm saying it's important. Nobody else is saying it's important. So I'm going to move this over into quadrant 1 as being urgent and important, so I don't neglect it. So So I'm going to put in 2 hours a day or whatever on writing this book. And I'm going to set goals for writing this book. I'm going to, the first month I'm going to work on chapter 1. Second month I'm going to work on chapter 2. Whatever schedule he put to it, he had to put that into a schedule. And he had to consider it urgent, in essence, in order to keep himself from ignoring it. Because clearly writing the book was something he did that nobody in the world told him he had to do. Nobody told him he had to write this book. Therefore, by definition, it was not urgent unless he made it urgent. Unless he was passionate about it. That's one thing he just said in this video, is that in order for you to do it, you have to develop a sense of passion for what's in quadrant 2. Because otherwise you will never get into your schedule. Quadrants 1 and 3 will take over your schedule. So what do you say about quadrant 3? What should you do to control your time enough that you have time for quadrant 2? What do you do to quadrant 3? He said by as much as you can, you simply say no. He was telling about his wife. His wife, very busy person also. Obviously, she's the one that had the 9 kids. So she was very busy. She also was involved in her church and her community. And so somebody in the community came to her and said, we'd like you to be the leader of this community project. And they told her how important it was and everything. And she said, okay. She on her side, she didn't know how she was going to fit into her schedule. But she said, okay. It's one of those situations I was talking about earlier where partly because of her husband, but also her own leadership ability, that her sphere of influence was greater than her sphere of concern. This was not her project. It was somebody else's project. But they convinced her that it was important, and therefore they wanted to put it in her area, in her sphere of concern, so to speak. So she accepted it. She went to her best friend and told her best friend, I'm working on this committee. We're doing this thing. I'm the chairman of it. We're going to do this important project. I could sure use some help. Could you please join the committee with me? And her best friend said, I'm so proud of you for doing this. This is a very important thing. But for a variety of reasons, I had to say no. I just don't have time to work on the committee with you. But I really appreciate that you're doing it. Well, his wife told him about this, told Dr. Covey about this, and said, I sure wish I had said what she said. But many times, some of us are afraid to say no. We can't say no to people. And that's one of my problems. I have a hard time saying no to people, which then infringes on my time to do the things that are in my quadrant 2. And so one of the most important things you do with quadrant 3 is to know when to say no. Sometimes, I still have paperwork back in Kazakhstan I haven't filled out for my university there. Sometimes you just ignore the management. If somebody really powerful doesn't come to you and say, you have to do this, you can ignore some things and get away with it. The other thing you can do, though, is delegate. And that's where that CEO of that oil company, for example, delegated to his managers more responsibility so he could be the true leader and set the vision and so forth, explore new opportunities. As you move up in organizations, learning how to delegate is really important. In here, your teams that are going to work on doing presentations. There may be a leader in each team. There probably will be. Somebody will take the leadership. And if that leader is not careful, he's going to end up doing all the work. He needs to make sure that he delegates among the other people in this team, or he's going to do all the work. Now, he may have to follow up with the other people because he may know these people well enough that he knows some of them are lazy. So he may have to do some follow-up on some of them. But if he doesn't do delegating, and he's a natural leader in the school here, he'll find himself absorbed with things that other people that are urgent, that are not in his own personal life that important, and that will hurt him. So you need to be strong in knowing how to control your schedule. Schedule 4 are the things that are neither important nor urgent. Basically, when you talk about 4, that's a waste of time. Okay, so if you have very much in your quadrant 4, if it's important, like for example, recreation. Recreation can be part of quadrant 2. At nights I go out and walk the track. I usually try to walk 12 kilometers because I know it's good for my heart, but I also spend that time thinking. And so one of the reasons why I don't run is that I want to think, and I can't think when I run. I don't think very well when I run. I'm thinking about how hard it is to run. And so I walk fast. I can walk at about a 6 kilometer per hour rate if I put a good effort into it. And so I can walk the 12 kilometer in 2 hours. So those 2 hours are my time to think and my time to help my body. So you have to make those decisions. Sometimes my wife comes out and walks with me. She can't walk that fast, so I have to slow up a little bit and walk with her because that's good time for me and her to talk. In which case, when she leaves, she finishes she typically goes about 4 kilometers with me, and then she goes home and I keep walking. So during those 4 kilometers, I have to slow up a little bit, so it takes me a little longer than 2 hours. But I fit that into my schedule because it's important for my heart and it's important for my head to have that time to think. So that becomes quadrant 4. That's not quadrant, or rather quadrant 2. That's not quadrant 4. I'm not wasting my time walking the track. That is quadrant 2 exercise to keep myself stronger, give myself time to think about my research, time to think about my family, time to think about other things that will guide the rest of my time. So this is the bottom line of this habit is your time matrix. Is figuring out what's urgent and important, what's important but not urgent. Try to find time for that. Try to control things that are urgent and not important. And try to eliminate things that are neither urgent nor important. Fill your life up with other things. Again, that doesn't mean eliminating recreation. That doesn't mean eliminating relationship building. If it's done strategically, all of that is quadrant 2. So that's fine to push that stuff up into quadrant 2 if it's not excessive, if it's not a waste of time. Let me put it that way. So you schedule it strategically. When do I have time for my friends? When do I have time for my exercise? And make that quadrant 2. Okay, there will be some other videos that will help you with this. This is probably the other important one, is that you start putting all this stuff together. Habit 2 is really the top one. Your mission statement, then considering your roles as a student, as a person in society, as a family member. Think about your different roles in life, and then establish your long-term goals. That's all pretty much quadrant 2, or not quadrant 2, but that is quadrant 2 in time management. But I'm thinking habit 2. It's habit 2, which you put in quadrant 2. You need to put time to do that. But then the stuff that you in your weekly organizing, that becomes what should control your life, and therefore that is your habit in doing that is your habit 3. That is manage your time, and so you need to analyze your roles, your goals, and your plans and make them very specific. As I mentioned, the Sritan that spoke here on Wednesday has an extremely detailed schedule, and he absolutely lives by it. One of the students asked him, how can you live by that schedule? Maybe your mind is thinking about something else or whatever. And he just says, it's a matter of willpower. You create a schedule and you live by it. Both he and a number of people have said you basically build your schedule the night before. And so the night before you build your schedule for the next day and you live by it. As detailed and as possible, because if you don't detail it, then almost by default you will ignore the second quadrant, which is the most important quadrant. Not the most, it's very important. Like by definition, maybe not the most important. The important and urgent maybe is the most important, but it will change your life. It's the writing the book for Dr. Covey. What if he had not written the book? He would have had a happy family still. He would have been a good worker still. He would have done lots of wonderful things, been a great church and community leader. But he would not have impacted 30, 40 million people. He would not have, in fact, indirectly, probably much more than that, because when he talks to a president of a country or a prime minister of a country or premier of a country, he's impacting millions of people indirectly. When he teaches a CEO of a company, he's impacting millions of people. And so his indirect effect has been on most of the world, frankly. Most of the world has been impacted some way by Dr. Covey. You may not know you've been impacted by him, but there's somebody in your life who read Dr. Covey and has had their life changed by Dr. Covey. And so he would have had a very happy and productive and successful life without writing that book. But he changed the world by writing the book. And that was quadrant 2. And that's the true for all of us. Our life will be changed by quadrant 2. But our life will be consumed by quadrant 1 and 3 if we let it be. And as he said, quadrant 4 sometimes is because we're so frustrated by the fact that we're being burned out by quadrant 1. Quadrant 1 is becoming bigger and bigger because more and more things get loaded onto us. And we're frustrated probably because we're not doing quadrant 2. And we're giving too much time to quadrant 3. And so we get tired, we get frustrated, and so we start watching TV and doing other things much worse than that in quadrant 4 because we're burned out, we're tired, we're frustrated, so we escape to quadrant 4. So in all of that, we make our lives much worse. Think quadrant 2, think habit 3, and that will change your life. Okay, we are next week scheduled to have a test or a quiz that is comprehensive for the whole 6 weeks. I have a question of you real quick. In order to control, put some control on the test so that people aren't cheating, I have to put some control on it. And so what I typically do for online tests is I give you a time, first off. I give you like 20 questions and 30 minutes to do the 20 questions. These 20 questions have all been questions that you should have seen if you did the weekly ones. They're going to be drawn directly from the weekly ones. Your quizzes, by the way, are all going to be different. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to, what Moodle allows me to do is say, choose 20 questions from all the questions I've asked. Choose 20 questions and you decide. The computer decides. I have no idea what questions you're going to be asked. And so one of you will have a different set of questions and the other is totally random by the computer. And then you have and by the way, your final exam comes from these quizzes. From all the quizzes. Every question that I make during the semester will be, it's possible to put in the final exam. That's why these weekly ones are important to you. They're not worth very much credit, but they're important to you. Any other questions? Anything else I can talk about? Help you with? Yeah, I'll be here if anybody needs to come talk to me individually. Thank you.